Chapter 12. I called my Uber friend to pick me up after I watched Ashton leave the research area and climb into his BMW alone. Peeping out of the small window, I stared at his car pulling out of his parking space and turning in the direction to the entrance of the hospital. Still feeling disappointed, I knew where I could go to feel better. I had to go home and eat my mother's cooking and listen to my father rail about the world and how the prices are rising, and he can't make it on his pension and Social Security. "You're early tonight, Dakota." I had to pick up another client, but I called him to say I wasn't available. "I'm losing money dealing with you, Dakota," Thomas said when I climbed into the back seat of the car. He turned around, watching at me for a second. "I can tell you like me, even if I drive you crazy. We understand each other." I leaned my elbow on the rest and lay my head on my fist. "You're all business, I know," I said to Thomas when I looked at his dark eyes in the mirror as he pulled out of the driveway. "That's what you want me to believe? All business." I laughed a little because nothing could be further from the truth. Thomas told me his problems as he drove me to and from work, and I listened. I'm a good listener most times. He said that he's an East Indian from Mumbai and found himself in Seattle because of the regime change. He had lived in different parts of Europe before migrating to the U.S. on a temporary visa. Unable to work in his profession, he turned to Uber for an income until he could get a job in technology and apply for citizenship. "What are you going to do if you can't drive me around any longer and I have to take the train?" I asked him. "Maybe get a life," he said, pulling off into traffic. "Take me to my parents' home." Thomas knew all about my family and me. My father helped him get on for Uber after seeing him walking in the rain one night. It was then he suggested that he could work for them, so he called a friend and that friend hired him. Now he has his own car and his hours are his own. "Do you expect me to pick you up or wait for you?" he asked after he made the turn off the highway. He knew the answer. He just wanted me to tell him. "No, Thomas. I don't want you to wait. You do have to make a living. My father will bring me back to my apartment." I glanced at him in the mirror and I heard a sigh, and a disappointed look crossed his face. "If it makes you feel better, I'll need you this week. After that, I don't know." I saw a smile on his face and then I said, "I'll probably have to take the train if Dr. Mieres doesn't fire me first. You work mostly at night, and he will probably assign me to someone else." "I want to work with another doctor," I said. As I watched silently out the car window at the rain-soaked streets, the cab traveled slowly through the old neighborhood I had grown up in. I ached to see the area with the thought of those days as a young girl. It hadn't been that long since I moved out. Something in me longed to go back, but I couldn't. I was grown now and on my own. The genie couldn't get back into the bottle, even if I wanted to. I had been turned down by a man I desired, and I wanted to climb into my bed in my parents' home and stay there, but I couldn't. When I glanced up from my thoughts, we were passing my high school, and in a minute we would be pulling into the driveway of my parents' home. I let out a sigh, and then a small laugh. "What happened with you and the doctor?" Thomas asked, interrupting my thoughts. "What do you mean?" "He's a busy man." I tried to act as if it wasn't anything personal that had occurred between us, but my voice must have betrayed me. "I mean, when you spoke of him before tonight, there was something in your voice that was soft and caring." "Oh, him. He's not interested in a 19-year-olds. He wants someone more matured." "Oh, I forgot I had a birthday. I'm 20 now." "How could you forget that, Dakota? And what man doesn't want a 20-year-old woman who's beautiful and smart?" "Dr. Ashton Mieres." Now where have I heard that name before? Thomas said, looking in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrow and his mind focused. "I know. I read about Mieres. He's a prominent research scientist. His eyes were blinking and his hand moved over his chin. Yes, I know now. The blood doctor, they called him. He's known around the world, and he has a brother. I can't recall what the brother's name is. How old is Dr. Mieres? 25, I think. No more than 27. How did you know about Ashton? I asked Thomas. He once had a clinic operating in India. His family has been studying blood-borne diseases and genetic disorders since the English controlled all of India. I have a scrapbook belonging to my father of newspaper clippings of his work. Some say Dr. Mieres took advantage of the poor and extracted their blood for his own use to make himself wealthy. Others say it was to extend his life. But what use could he have for blood? To sell it, to drink it, Thomas said to me, looking at me in the rearview mirror, expecting a reaction which he got. Be serious, Thomas? I'm serious. There are tales in my country about men who drink blood to live, and it prolongs their lives. They are called the immortals, and you never see them during the day. In my country we have tales too, and they called them Dracula or vampires. And that's all they are, tales. Fiction. And what's more, that couldn't be my doctor. Must have been his father or grandfather. Perhaps, Thomas said, not at all convinced. The car came to an abrupt stop. Now how much this time? He parked in front of my parents' home near the front door. I was ready to run from his tales of vampires. I seem to be running into that notion of blood-sucking immortals lately, or I'm just noticing it more often now. I can't afford you, Thomas. I handed him $20. I know. In fact, that cab ride was cheap. But he took the money and said, "See you tomorrow." He didn't give me any change. Stepping out of the cab, I stood and glanced at the house and neighborhood I called home. I wanted to go back, but I couldn't. It was just to visit now. I was all grown and fell in love with a man who doesn't love me, and he doesn't even want what I was offering, my virginity. It's a bad feeling when you want to give something away, and no one wants it. That was all I had and my devotion to him, and yet that wasn't enough. In serious need of a cry and a hug, I held it in and walked up the steps and rang the bell. I had my key, but I didn't want to startle anyone. My mother came to the door dressed for bed, in a gown and heavy robe. She could tell something was wrong. Where else do you go when you need someone? Home. Come in, baby. I'm glad you came. I hoped it would be sooner. You've been gone for months. And she gave me a hug, as if she thought I would disappear before her eyes. We walked into the room past the dining area, and to the back where Father sat watching late-night television, and was having a conversation with the news people. Ever since I can remember, he talked to the TV. He turned to see me, and rose from his chair and greeted me, and then went back to the news programs he had seen earlier. Standing for a few and looking at me hug my father, she said, "There's something I want you to see. I forgot to give you this scrapbook." She turned and started walking in the direction of my room. "You didn't forget to give me that satchel filled with knives and things," I said with a snarky tone to my voice. She glanced at me. "I knew you would need it someday, but I thought I would have more time to tell you about your birth father and why I let you think that John was your real father." "Does he know?" "Yes. Come." My mother took my hand and led me into my room. She opened a chest and pulled out a scrapbook with pictures and newspaper clippings of a young man, thin and handsome with a beard. He stood 6 feet. I smiled, but my birth father's face showed the look of a man in pain. He didn't smile in any of the images. Picture after picture traveling from different countries, he wore that same pained expression. His blue eyes sad in each photograph, either standing in the middle of people. Then the headlines gripped me. Renowned Dr. Overbridge once thought dead resurfaces in India. He stated to the reporter that he was on the verge of a huge discovery. That there were indeed vampires, and he would be the one to wipe them from the face of the earth. Immortals have no right to prey on the indefensible poor, who are mortals, and to bleed them dry. I glance up at my mother. Really? What does that mean? Your father had a theory that immortals were preying on humans, and he had to put a stop to it before all humanity was wiped from the face of the earth, and worse yet, for humans to be kept like cattle to feed the vampires. But we know vampires don't exist, I said, shifting nervously on the bed, waiting for her to confirm that there is no such thing as a vampire. Do we really? With his outbursts and determined to unmask them, the government locked him away for his own safety. He was a brilliant man, but now he's dead. He died at the hands of this man whom your father had declared as one of the immortals. My mother pulled an old picture from a scrapbook. It was the picture of a handsome, youthful man. Look at him and don't forget that face. He's the one who your father said would come for you and kill you. You're the only one who could destroy him. I couldn't hide the shock and distress that covered my face. My expression said it all. I put my hands to my mouth and let out a hard breath. What is it, Dakota? I work for this man in the research department. The research is about blood. He's dangerous. You have to leave and leave soon. I don't understand. Dr. Mieres is a young man. In this picture, he could resemble anyone. There's another doctor who resembles the one in this picture. To that my mother said, you have to find the right one and kill him. You can't be serious, Mother. Kill a man? I couldn't tell her I had been intimate with him, or that the other doctor is interested in me. Ashton had kissed me and held me in a tender embrace. His mouth tenderly caressed me. He didn't want me dead. He just didn't want me to be a virgin. Nothing made any sense. There was nothing that fit, and this wasn't the way it should have been. I should have married that man and had his children, and socialized with his friends. But he had no friends that I knew of. He had many women desiring him, waiting for him to pay attention to them, but it was me he appeared to want, and now he doesn't want me at all. Did he know who my father was? How could he? Even I was afraid of the answer. Not unless he was the doctor in that photo, and not his father who I thought and wanted it to be. Maybe he did want me dead, but needed me close to him. But for what reason? Here, take this scrapbook and study it, and read all about this man who killed your father, and if you expect to live and have children, then you will have to kill that vampire. Looking at her tormented face, I knew she had to be serious. Did she believe what she was saying, because she was ill? I put my arms around her, and as she shook with terror and I tried to comfort her. I had gone to my mother for reassurance and to discuss the man I so much wanted, and who had discarded me because I was what most men wanted but not him. Mom, you should see a doctor. When was the last time you had a checkup? I could think of no other reason for this kind of conversation about killing vampires, other than my mother was seriously ill with a brain tumor. Last week. I saw the doctor last week. There's nothing wrong with me, she whispered. I'm probably healthier than you. Look at you, thin as a rail. I've cooked your favorite meal. I'll warm it for you. She held my hand, and then she trotted in the direction of the kitchen to prepare my fajitas before I could protest. It was too late to eat. I lay on the bed after my mother left the room, and I fell asleep. I dreamed of Ashton and my father. I dreamed of a man I would have wanted to know, my birth father. He sounds interesting, but he too was probably a bit off his rocker. And I dreamed of a man who I wanted to love me and have me love him, Ashton. These were two different men, yet I wanted the same thing, their love. Chapter 13. My adopted father, the only father I knew who loved me dearly, drove me to my apartment. When I woke in my bed after a restful sleep, with no more nightmares and dreams of a man who remained in the fog of my mind and didn't visit me anymore, I felt renewed. I had grown up, and I was a big girl now, and I didn't need any dreams to make me happy. I had to make my own life with its uncertainties and perils along the way. I could no longer depend on the safety of my parents' home. When I opened my bedroom door, I expected to see Paige, and once again she hadn't come home. But this time I wouldn't go rushing off in the dead of night to rescue her, or go off to some stranger's gated community because Paige wanted to introduce me to a doctor. I didn't need a doctor or lawyer to be happy. All I needed was a chance to go to college and build a life for myself out of the cold and rain, and splash a little sunshine on my face. I woke an hour later still in my sundress my mother was surprised to see me wearing, because I didn't even wear it when I was in the 9th grade, because I felt the students would laugh at me, along with all the other outrageous clothes I wore, which my mother had sewn, and I had been her model. Not knowing better. But I know better now. Discarding my dress with the other unwashed mess, I rushed into the shower. While there with the warm water flowing, I could think, and nothing was more pressing than to think about Ashton and what had happened between us. I would need to resign. When stepping out of the shower, I reached for a towel with my eyes closed, and the shower door opened. My hand is flailing in front of me. I knew that I had put the towel on the door handle, but it wasn't there. Then a hand extended with the towel, and the person behind the hand said, "Here?" I flinched and said, "What do you want?" "What are you doing here?" "I'm naked." "Yes, I know. I've seen you naked before." "Not like this," I said with a hoarse voice. I didn't want to be reminded of that unfortunate occurrence. Nor did I want to see him again. I wanted to pretend that this wasn't a part of my life anymore, especially after tonight. "Shouldn't you be on a date?" "It was just a dinner date," he said with animated pleasure. "Why, are you jealous?" He slanted his head to the side and downward, holding my eyes with his. "Of you and another woman?" "Of course not. I'm more matured than that. I know if a man rejects me, it's because I'm not what turns him on. Maybe her large breasts caught your eyes and something else. As you can see, I'm not that endowed." He walked closer to me. We stood looking at each other. Needing each other. If it wasn't need on his part, why was he here? "Yes, your breasts are quite small," he said, glancing at me with a raise of his lip into a small, closed smile, but his eyes shone a soft, sexy glare. "How did you get in?" "You left the door unlocked." I didn't think about it, because at the time I may have. "You should go. In the time we saw each other hours before, I didn't run out and suddenly become unvirgin, if that is a word, which I doubt." And I saw a small smile on his handsome face, and then it turned into a broad smile with laughter. "You asked me why I came. I came to apologize to you for what I did to you. If you are talking about the finger fuck, I think I can survive. And don't beat yourself up over anything, because it was consensual. But I have a problem with you leaving me for that nurse. She's someone I knew in Europe, and when she immigrated to the US, she needed to work, and I gave her a job, that's all." I reached for a robe, because he thought it necessary to make these lengthy explanations with me standing in a towel and naked underneath. I had no power other than to ask him to leave, but I was interested in what kind of explanation he would give me for his behavior. "I should have known better. You were my intern and I'm your supervisor." I stopped him. "You were my supervisor. I'm handing in my letter of resignation, and don't worry about how it looks. You have hundreds of young women who are not virgins, who will gladly take my spot. You can't go." "I can and I will." He pulled me into his arms. "Can't you see that I haven't been myself from the minute I laid eyes on you? I've wanted to take you in my arms and hold you like this, but I didn't dare let myself do it. I didn't think that a young woman like you would want a man like myself." What is he talking about? I'm thinking. How could I not want someone like him? He's what women dreams are made of. I made a mistake. Can you forgive me? He said. I need you in the worst way. I promise you that I will never treat you the way I've been doing. Just give me another chance to make it up to you. He sounds like an average man who wants to fuck a woman. Begging and pleading. But was he normal or something worse? I know nothing about you, Ashton. Before it didn't matter, but now that I've had a chance to think and clear my head, I want to know more about you. Your life, your family. I need to know those things before I fall completely and irreversibly in love with you. He raised an eyebrow. You love me? Ashton asked that question as if it was a remote chance that I could ever love him, ever. Didn't you know it? Couldn't you see it on my face? Didn't you see how all those women looked at me? They knew that I was in love with you because they had seen that look on their faces in the mirror. How could you not see it too? Because I was trying to push you away from me. I thought you were too young to be with me. But I thought of you all the time. I longed for you to want me. I'm only a few years younger than you. I reminded him. His expression stilled and became somber. He strode to the bed and sat on the corner. Reaching for me, he brought me to his lap, and I sat there with him cradling me in his arms. Then he placed me on my back, opened the robe, and I lay there with the towel wrapped around me, and I waited until he had quickly removed his shirt and slacks and shoes. He stood before me naked. His powerful muscular chest leaned over me. I saw a large faded tattoo across his arms. I couldn't make out what kind of symbol it was. What's that? I asked as I smoothed my hand along his hard muscles. You need to go to a tanning room. You are so pale and cold. Your body is cold. And you aren't, he said, leaning over me, his eyes penetrating me as he looked at my breasts and mouth. His amber eyes are piercing my blue eyes as if he could see into me. Seeing something I didn't know was there, me. The other me. He narrowed his vision and his face changed. What is it, Ashton? I thought I saw someone I had met a long time ago. Someone who had your eyes. But he's dead. His eyes returned to me. His mind returned to the moment. Kiss me. Talking about the dead in the same voice as demanding a kiss disturbed me, but I forgot that in a minute when his lips touched my nipples, causing them to harden and crest to volcanic peaks. As his demands on my body grew, I placed my arms around his neck and he leaned his mouth to mine, and his kiss was more powerful and electrifying than it had been before. We were in a bed now, and I wasn't sitting on a cold granite counter. The sensation from the counter mirrored his body, and in my bed, I felt his cold hard body press against mine and I shivered. He placed the comforter around me to give me warmth as he began to arouse me with his kisses. As Ashton lay over me, his firm cold manhood laid firmly on my leg. His intense lovemaking of kissing my breasts, with his hands stimulating my thighs, I felt my skin tremble. His mouth moved from my lips to kissing my neck. And back to my breasts, and all I could feel was the heat that stirred inside me. With waves of passion throbbing through me, raising my temperature until I no longer felt the chill of his body pressing against mine, I held him tightly. I pushed the comforter away, because of the stifling scorching heat rising from my body. I loved every moment he had me beneath him. He passed his lips over mine, and then his tongue inserted into my closed lips, and when his tongue entered into my mouth, his penis entered my opening. When his hips crashed into my hips, he had entered me and taken what he didn't want before. I grabbed his back and dug my nails into his skin, and it was as if it didn't affect him. I clawed and scratched from the pain, and I should have drawn blood, but none appeared. With his eyes closed, he pushed deep into me, and then I felt the moisture that lubricated us, and I became aroused as he broke through, restraining his body so he couldn't bear his weight down on me. Don't hold back. I'm not easy to break, I murmured into his ear. I felt his body relax over mine. It was instinctive, as we both seemed to relax as if we had known each other before. But you don't understand. I can't control myself around you. That meant nothing to me. I was being satisfied, and I wanted him to be the same without restrictions. If I get carried away, he said, breathing hard and watching me, I warn you that it could happen. Don't judge me, please. It's just that I need you. It's just because I love you, Dakota. I love you more than life. At the time, it must have been easy for him to say that to me. It wasn't hard for me to say, I love you too, Ashton. Because I did. I never felt the rush of emotion that I was experiencing. Never. A calmness flowed over me and settled through my body as I reached my orgasm. A weight had been removed off of me in more ways than one. I was no longer a virgin, and the man I desired took that, and now he would know that this was something he didn't have to fear, and I would be his. I claimed him. He didn't have to claim me. I would be exclusive to him. But that was short-sighted on my part. As Ashton reached the summit of his climax, he gnashed around with his face buried in the bed. I tried to pretend that it was part of the way he handled his arousal, but it appeared to be something different and unusual for a man. His moaning and thrashing over me seemed unfamiliar to me, like something a wild beast would do with his mate. At any moment I thought he would call for handcuffs to restrain him, but he didn't, and as he reached the peak of his orgasm, he calmed down. His buried head on the side of my neck rose, and I noticed blood trickling down his lips. Touching my shoulder, I slowly brought 2 fingers up. It was blood indeed. I'm sorry, Dakota. I should have warned you. Warned me about what? What is it you should have said to me? At that moment, I became alarmed. What more should I have known about Ashton that I didn't take time to discover? When he fell to the side and lay on his back, there was a drop of blood on the sheets too. He took the top coat and covered me. What is wrong with you? Haven't you seen blood on a woman before? If we're going to date, then there will be many occasions where I will have my period. The only time when that's not happening is when I'm pregnant, but I don't plan on that for years. He lay on his back looking to the ceiling, as if counting the blades on the fan, or his mind had left the room and taken him with it. I pushed at his shoulder. What is it, Ashton? What did you need to tell me? That I'm and you shouldn't be around me. You are a what? You haven't said anything. What are you? I'm leaning over him now and dragging my nail up and down and across his chest, trying to get his skin to bump, but it doesn't. I did notice one thing, and that he kept a constant hard-on. Maybe that was what he wanted to tell me, but couldn't bring himself to say that he was a sex addict, or one of those people who needed sex all the time. Are you a nymphomaniac? I questioned. His eyes grew wide open and his brow furrowed. He had that expression of people who had seen a lot and been everywhere. A way they looked at the world, as if they knew too much. I think that would be a word to describe a woman who wants to engage in sex all the time. She has an insatiable urge to have sex, and I don't think you qualify as one. This conversation is not about me but you. Hoping on top of his chest, he pushed me gently to the side. I said with a playful voice, give me time, I might become one. Go and take a shower. You have blood all over you? What's the big deal? You handle blood all the time. Not fresh blood. I crossed over him and stepped onto the floor. I left my mark across his stomach. It was the blood he had helped create. When I turned to laugh at him, he shuddered at the blood on his chest. Then I strode into the shower. I stayed only for a few minutes, but when I stepped on the cold floor, I said, bring me a towel, Ashton. It's in that closet near the bed. Don't mind the dirty clothes, I'll get around to it. Ashton. Ashton, where are you? Walking out of the restroom and into my bedroom, he was gone, and the sheets were stripped from the bed and onto the floor. What the fuck? Not again. At that moment, I didn't know how to feel. I knew when a man leaves you and you don't ask him to go, that can't be too good. Maybe I needed this to wake me up to the reality of relationships, and this man. I thought I had found the man of my dreams. I had plans for those few hours of us being together, and especially when he said that he loved me. But more experienced women than me have been made fools of when they have fallen for the wrong man, and now I knew that Ashton was the wrong man for me.